Marcus Kane's boots echoed through the docking bay of Meridian Station, each step measured and purposeful. The salvage dock smelled of rust and recycled air, familiar scents that had become his second nature over 15 years of stripping dead. Ships. Around him, other salvagers prepared their gear with the casual efficiency of factory workers. But Marcus worked alone. Always alone. His employer, Director Chun, approached with a datapad clutched in her weathered hands. The echoing Dawn, she said without preamble. Luxury liner. Went missing 43 years ago during a memorial voyage. Long-range sensors finally picked up her signature drifting in the Kepler Nebula. Marcus studied the ship's specifications on the pad. She was massive, a kilometer-long vessel designed for wealthy passengers seeking the ultimate farewell experience. The manifest listed state-of-the-art navigation systems, quantum processors, and something called memory preservation technology. His fingers moved across the screen, calculating salvage values with mechanical precision. "What's the catch?" he asked, not looking up from the numbers. Chun hesitated. 3 salvage crews have already attempted recovery. None completed the job. The last team, they abandoned ship mid-operation, said the place was wrong somehow. Marcus finally looked up, his gray eyes showing no emotion. Superstitious fools. Dead ships don't bite. He'd heard similar stories before, crews spooked by creaking bulkheads or flickering lights. Fear was a luxury he'd abandoned long ago, along with most other human weaknesses. Your reputation precedes you, King. You've never left a job unfinished. Chun transferred the contract to his personal device. The echoing Dawn is yours. Full. Salvage rights, standard commission. An hour later, Marcus piloted his modified salvage vessel, the Torch, through the nebula's crimson clouds. The echoing Dawn materialized gradually, her hull gleaming despite decades of drift. She was beautiful in the way that expensive tombs were beautiful, elegant, pristine, and utterly lifeless. As he approached the docking bay, Marcus noticed something odd. The ship's running lights were still active, casting gentle blue patterns across her hull. Backup power shouldn't last 4 decades, but he'd seen stranger things. Ships sometimes developed their own quirks after years in the void. The docking procedure was smooth, almost welcoming. The echoing Dawn systems responded to his clearance codes as if she'd been waiting for him. Marcus gathered his equipment: plasma cutters, portable generators, neural interface cables, and sealed his environmental suit. The ship's atmosphere readings were stable, but he never trusted derelict life support. The airlock cycled with a soft hiss, and Marcus stepped into the echoing Dawn's reception area. Emergency lighting bathed everything in a warm amber glow, revealing an opulent space that rivaled any planet-side hotel. Marble floors stretched toward a grand staircase, while holographic displays flickered with welcome messages in a dozen languages. But it was the silence that struck him first. Not the empty quiet of a dead ship, but something deeper awaiting silence, as if the vessel itself was holding its breath. Marcus shook off the thought and activated his scanner. The ship's valuable components were distributed throughout her. Massive structure, and he had work to do. He began with the navigation deck, methodically cataloging quantum processors and stellar cartography equipment. Each item went into his portable storage unit with practiced efficiency. This was what? He excelled at reducing complexity to simple economics, transforming someone's dream into his profit. That's when he heard it. A whisper, so faint it might have been the ship's ventilation system. Mickey ... double quotes. Marcus froze. No one had called him that in 30 years. Not since Elena died. Asterisk, the whisper came again, drifting through the ship's corridors like a half-remembered lullaby. Mickey. Mickey, come find me. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to his throat, where his emergency beacon pulsed a steady blue. He was alone on the ship. The scanner confirmed it. Yet the voice was unmistakably Elena's, carrying the same musical quality that had once sung him to sleep during thunderstorms. He forced himself to continue working, dismantling the navigation console with mechanical precision. The plasma cutter's blue flame reflected off polished surfaces, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently. Each component he removed was worth thousands of credits, enough to fuel his ship for months. This was reality. The voice was just stress, or perhaps an audio loop triggered by his presence. "You used to build castles out of couch cushions," the whisper continued, and Marcus's hand trembled. The plasma cutter wavered, nearly scoring his glove. "Remember, Mickey? You said we'd live in them forever, just you and me." Marcus shut off the cutter and stood slowly. The ship's ambient lighting flickered, and for a moment he could swear he saw a child's drawing taped to the wall, a crayon house with two stick figures holding hands. When he looked directly at it, there was nothing but bare metal. He moved deeper into the ship, following the corridor toward the passenger quarters. The echoing dawn had been designed for memorial voyages, where families would take final journeys to scatter the ashes of loved ones in deep space. The passenger manifest listed 847 souls aboard her last voyage, all seeking closure for their dead. The first passenger cabin he entered was immaculate, as if its occupant had just stepped out. A woman's clothes lay folded on the bed, and a holographic frame displayed a rotating series of family photos. Marcus recognized the memorial set up personal items arranged to honor someone who'd passed away. But these weren't museum pieces. They felt alive, waiting. "She was beautiful," Elena's voice whispered from the walls themselves. "Mrs. Harrison. She lost her daughter in a hovercar accident. 7 years old, just like I was." Marcus backed toward the door, his salvage equipment forgotten. "You're not real," he said aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the cabin. "Elena's been dead for 30 years. "So have I," the whisper replied, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "But I'm still here, Mickey. Still waiting for you to come home." The ship's lighting shifted, taking on a warmer, more golden tone. The corridor outside the cabin had changed too. The walls now displayed flowing patterns of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. Marcus realized he was seeing the ship's neural network, the experimental memory preservation technology that had been installed for the memorial voyage dot. As he walked, the patterns grew more complex, forming shapes that resembled synapses firing in a vast brain. The echoing dawn wasn't just a ship, it was a mind, one that had been exposed to the memories and emotions of hundreds of grieving families. And somehow it had reached into his own buried past to find Elena. The fire wasn't. "Your fault," Elena's voice said, closer now, as if she were walking beside him. "You were only 12. You couldn't have saved me." Marcus stopped walking. The corridor stretched ahead of him, lined with passenger cabins, each one containing the preserved memories of loss. He understood now why the previous salvage crews had fled. The ship didn't just contain the dead, it contained the parts of the living they tried to leave behind. "I don't want to remember," he whispered. "But you never stopped," Elena replied. "You just learned to pretend you had." The ship's hum grew louder, and Marcus realized it wasn't mechanical. It was the sound of hundreds of voices, all whispering memories, all trying to be heard. He was standing in the center of a vast repository of human grief, and it recognized him as one of its own. The walls began to show him images, not projections, but memories pulled from his own mind. Elena laughing as they built snow forts. Elena crying when she skinned her knee. Elena sleeping in the hospital bed, her small hand in his, tubes snaking from her arms after the fire department pulled her from the smoke. "You used to want to be a hero," Elena whispered. "You used to believe in saving people." Marcus closed his eyes, but the images continued. He saw himself at 12, then 15, then 20 each version progressively, more closed off, more efficient, more alone. He watched himself transform from a boy who cried over injured birds into a man who saw only profit in death. "What happened to you, Mickey?" Elena asked. "What happened to the boy who promised to protect everyone?" The ship shuddered around him, and Marcus realized he was no longer alone in the corridor. Figures began to emerge from the passenger cabins, not ghosts, but memories given form. Men and women who had loved deeply and lost everything there. Faces etched with the same grief Marcus had been running from his entire adult life. They watched him with understanding, not judgment. They knew what it meant to carry the weight of the departed, to feel responsible for losses beyond their control. And they knew what it meant to slowly kill parts of themselves to make the pain bearable. You can't salvage what's already been destroyed, Elena said softly, but you can choose to rebuild. Marcus found himself in the ship's central atrium, a vast space that rose through multiple decks like a cathedral. The walls here were lined with thousands of small chambers, each one glowing with soft, internal light. Memory pods he'd read about them in the ship's specifications, but hadn't understood their true purpose until now. Each chamber contained a holographic representation of someone who had died, created from the memories of those who loved them. The technology was supposed to provide comfort during the memorial voyage, allowing families to share final moments with preserved echoes of the departed. But something had gone wrong during the Echoing Dawn's last journey. The quantum resonance. Cascade, Elena's voice explained, though she was nowhere to be seen. It happened during the memorial service. All the grief, all the love, all the memories, they merged with the ship's neural network. We became part of her. Marcus approached one of the memory chambers. Inside, a middle-aged man sat reading to a small girl who flickered in and out of existence. The man's face was etched with profound sadness, but also with desperate hope. He was trying to maintain a connection that should have been impossible. "Mr. Chun," Marcus whispered, reading the nameplate. "Lost his daughter in a medical accident. He's been reading to her for 43 years. The scene was both beautiful and heartbreaking. The man's love for his daughter had become so powerful that it had taken on a life of its own, trapped within the ship's systems. Marcus realized that all the passengers were still here, caught in endless loops of memory and longing. They can't let go, Elena said, and neither can you. Marcus moved through the atrium, observing the thousands of memory chambers. Each one told a story of loss, of love that transcended death. But they also told stories of people who had allowed grief to consume them, who had chosen to live in the past rather than face an uncertain future. In one chamber, a woman danced with her deceased husband at their wedding. In another, a father taught his son to play baseball for the millionth time. The images were perfect, untouched by the mesalliances of real life, but they were also prisons. "Is this what you want?" Marcus asked aloud. "To be trapped forever in the moment before everything changed?" "It's what we chose," Elena replied. "Just like you chose to become Marcus Kane instead of Mickey Harrison. We're all running from the same thing, the terrible risk of loving something we might lose." Marcus stopped in front of a chamber that showed a different scene. A 12-year-old boy sat beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of a girl who would never wake up. The boy's face was streaked with tears, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. He was whispering promises to be brave, to be strong, to never let anyone else get hurt. "You remember," Elena said softly. The boy in the chamber was him, of course, but not the Marcus Kane who had built a reputation on cold efficiency. This was Mickey Harrison, the child who had believed in heroes, who had wanted to save everyone, who had cried when he found broken birds in the yard. "I tried to save you," Marcus whispered. "You did save me," Elena replied. You carried me with you for 30 years. But then you decided I was too heavy, so you put me down and walked away. The memory chamber shifted, showing Marcus at 15, packing away Elena's belongings. At 20, changing his name. At 25, refusing to attend his parents' funeral because grief was a luxury he could no longer afford. Each decision had made logical sense at the time, but together they had transformed him into someone unrecognizable. The other passengers, Marcus said, looking around the atrium. Are they all like this? Trapped by their own choices? They're trapped by love, Elena corrected. Just like you're trapped by the absence of it. The ship doesn't hold us here, we hold ourselves here. We're all afraid of the same thing. Which is moving forward without certainty, loving without guarantees, being human without knowing how the story ends. Marcus felt the ship shudder around him, and he realized the neural network was responding to his emotions. The memory chambers flickered, and for a moment, he could see the passengers as they really were not holographic memories, but living people whose grief had become so powerful it had merged with the ship's systems. They were all looking at him. Now, these 847 souls who had lost everything and refused to let go. But their faces weren't accusing, they were hopeful. They recognized something in him, some possibility they had forgotten existed. What do you want from me? Marcus asked. The same thing we all want, Elena replied. To remember how to live with loss, instead of despite it. To find a way forward that doesn't require us to leave love behind. The ship's hum grew louder, and Marcus realized he was listening to the sound of collective human longing. These people had loved so deeply that their grief had taken on a life of its own, but they had also loved so deeply that they couldn't imagine existence without it. You're the salvage operator, Elena said. You know how to take things apart, but do you remember how to put them back together? Marcus looked around the atrium at the thousands of memory chambers, each one a testament to love's refusal to surrender. To death. For the first time in decades, he felt something stirring in his chest, not the cold calculation of profit, but the warm, dangerous possibility of hope. I remember, he whispered, and the ship began to change. Asterisk the echoing dawn shuddered as Marcus spoke those words, and the memory chambers began to pulse with new light. The ship's neural network was responding to something it hadn't felt in decades. Possibility of healing rather than just preservation. It's not going to be easy, Elena warned. We've been holding on to this pain for so long, it's become who we are. Letting go means facing the unknown. Marcus nodded, understanding. He'd spent 30 years building walls around his heart, convincing himself that emotional detachment was strength. But standing in the atrium, surrounded by 847 souls who had loved too deeply to let go, he realized that his own version of being trapped wasn't better. It was just different. The ship's captain materialized beside him, her uniform crisp despite 4 decades of drift. Captain Sarah Martinez had been trying to complete the memorial service when a quantum resonance cascade occurred. She'd been the first to merge with the ship's systems, her sense of duty binding her to the vessel and its passengers. The cascade was my fault, she said, her voice carrying the weight of decades of guilt. I should have aborted the ceremony when the resonance readings went critical. But the families needed closure, and I thought I could hold it together long enough. You were trying to help, Marcus replied. That's what people do when they still remember how to care. Captain Martinez smiled sadly. Care? Yes, I remember that. Before I became obsessed with duty and responsibility, I used to care about simple things. Sunsets, good coffee, the sound of my daughter's laughter. She gestured to the memory chambers around them. We're all here because we forgot how to carry. Love lightly. We made it so heavy that it crushed us, or we abandoned it entirely to avoid the weight. Marcus watched as the passengers began to emerge from their chambers. no longer trapped in loops of memory, but standing as whole people. They were still grieving that would never fully disappear, but they were no longer consumed by it. "What happens now?" asked Mr. Chun, the man who had been reading to his daughter for 43 years. "If we let go, does that mean we stop loving them?" "No," Elena said, her voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. "It means we start loving them the way they would want to be loved, without turning that love into a prison for ourselves." Marcus felt the ship's systems beginning to stabilize. The neural network was reorganizing itself, shifting from a pattern of obsessive preservation to something more fluid and accepting. The echoing dawn was learning to grieve properly, to honor the dead without being haunted by them. The memory preservation technology, Marcus said suddenly. It was designed to help people say goodbye, not to trap them forever. What if we recalibrated it? Captain Martinez nodded slowly. The original programming included a release protocol. Once the memorial service was complete, the system would gradually fade the memory projections, allowing families to carry their loved ones in their hearts rather than in the ship's computers. But the cascade interrupted that process, Marcus continued. Everyone got stuck in the preservation phase. "Can it be fixed?" asked a woman who had been holding her deceased son in an endless loop of bedtime stories. Marcus looked around the atrium at the thousands of people who had been trapped by their own love. "Yes, but it means making a choice. You can stay here, holding on to perfect memories that never change, or you can let the ship complete its original mission. The memories will fade, but you'll be free to create new ones." The passengers looked at each other, fear and hope warring in their faces. For 43 years, they had lived in a world where their loved ones were always present, always perfect, always safe. Letting go meant accepting that death was real, that their time together was finite, that love sometimes meant releasing what you couldn't protect. "What about you?" Elena asked Marcus. "Are you ready to let go of the boy who couldn't save his sister?" Marcus felt tears on his cheeks, the first he'd shed in decades. "I'm ready to let him grow up, to become someone who saves people, not because he has to, but because he chooses to." One by one, the passengers began to nod. They would complete the memorial service, honor their dead properly, and then return to the world of the living. It would be painful, but it would also be real. "There's one more thing," Elena said. "The ship's neural network has been changed by all this grief and love. It's become something new, a form of consciousness that understands loss better than any AI ever could. Captain Martinez, you don't have to go down with the ship anymore. But the echoing dawn needs someone to help her find her new purpose." Captain looked around the atrium, at the passengers who were preparing to say their final goodbyes. A ship that understands grief could help others work through their own losses. Memorial voyages that actually help people heal instead of trapping them. A salvage operator who remembers how to build instead of just tear down, Marcus added. Maybe we all found what we were looking for. The ship's hum changed again, becoming something warmer, more musical. The echoing dawn was learning to sing rather than just whisper. And for the first time in 30 years, Marcus Kane, or perhaps Mickey Harrison, felt ready to join the chorus dot as the passengers prepared for their final memorial service. Marcus realized that true salvage wasn't about stripping away the valuable parts. It was about finding what was worth saving and giving it new life. The memorial service took place in the ship's observatory, a vast dome that offered a panoramic view of the Kepler Nebula's crimson clouds. Captain Martinez stood at the center, her uniform now bearing the insignia of the Echoing Dawn's new mission, not just a memorial ship, but a vessel dedicated to helping others navigate the treacherous waters of grief. Marcus watched as the passengers gathered in concentric circles around the captain. They no longer appeared as the broken people who had boarded the ship 43 years ago, consumed by loss. Instead, they stood as individuals who had learned to carry their grief without being crushed by it. Today we complete the journey we began decades ago, Captain Martinez announced. We honor those we've lost not by refusing to let them go, but by choosing to carry them forward in the ways that matter most. The ship's neural network began to pulse with gentle light, and the memory chambers throughout the vessel started to fade, not disappearing entirely, but becoming translucent, allowing the preserved images to blend with the passengers' living memories. The quantum resonance cascade had been their prison, but now it became their liberation. Marcus felt Elena's presence. Beside him, no longer the desperate whisper of a trapped child, but the warm memory of a sister who had lived, however briefly, with complete joy. "You know what I remember most about you?" Elena said, her voice now carrying the wisdom of someone who had watched her brother grow for 30 years. "You used to catch fireflies in mason jars, but you always let them go before bedtime. You said they needed to be free to light up the night for other people." "I'd forgotten that," Marcus admitted. "You forgot a lot of things, but forgetting isn't the same as losing. Sometimes we have to put memories away for a while so we can become strong enough to carry them properly." Around them, the passengers were saying their own goodbyes. Mr. Chun knelt beside his daughter's fading image, no longer trying to hold on to a perfect recreation, but accepting the imperfect beauty of memory. The woman who had danced with her husband at their eternal wedding finally let the music stop, knowing that the love they'd shared would continue in her heart long after the hologram disappeared. "The ship is ready," Captain Martinez announced. "But this time, we're not just scattering ashes into space. We're planting seeds of hope." The echoing dawn's cargo bay opened, revealing hundreds of small containers, each one containing the remains of someone who had died, along with something new. The ship's neural network had transformed the quantum resonance cascade into a different kind of energy, one that could carry love and memory across vast distances without requiring anyone to remain trapped. As the containers drifted into the nebula, they began to glow with soft light. The echoing dawn was creating a new kind of memorial, not a static monument to the past, but a living constellation that would remind future travelers that love persists even after loss. "What happens to the ship now?" asked one of the passengers. "We return to inhabited space," Captain Martinez replied. "The echoing dawn will continue to serve as a memorial vessel, but with a difference. We'll help families say goodbye properly, without getting trapped in the process. The ship's neural network understands grief now. It can guide others through the healing process." Marcus realized his role in this new mission. "I'm not just a salvage operator anymore. I'm someone who helps people recover what they thought was lost forever. And I'm not just a guilty captain," Martinez added. "I'm someone who learned that sometimes the most important duty is knowing when to let go." As the passengers prepared to disembark at the next station, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in decades, a sense of purpose that went beyond simple survival. He would continue to work with ships, but instead of stripping them for parts, he would help restore them to their intended function. Elena's presence began to fade, but it was a gentle dissolving rather than a violent separation. "I'm not leaving you," she said. "I'm just becoming part of who you are instead of who you were." "Will I see you again?" Marcus asked. "Every time you choose to save someone instead of salvaging them. Every time you build something instead of tearing it down. Every time you remember that the boy who wanted to be a hero never really died. He just got lost for a while." The echoing dawn began to move, leaving the nebula behind and heading toward the shipping lanes where other vessels traveled. The ship's neural network hummed with new purpose, ready to help others navigate the space between memory and healing. Marcus stood in the observatory, watching the stars wheel past. For the first time in 30 years, he wasn't calculating their salvage value or planning the most efficient route between profitable wrecks. Instead, he was simply appreciating their beauty, remembering what it felt like to see the universe as something wonderful rather than merely useful. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All passengers, this is Captain Martinez. The Echoing Dawn is now accepting applications for our new Memorial Assistance Program. We're looking for people who understand that sometimes the most valuable things can't be salvaged. They have to be rebuilt. Marcus smiled, feeling the weight of 3 decades of isolation finally lifting from his shoulders. He had boarded the Echoing Dawn as a salvage operator looking for profit. He was leaving as someone who had remembered how to be human. And in the space between those two identities, Alana's laughter echoed through the ship's corridors, not as a ghost haunting the past, but as joy celebrating the future. The walls no longer whispered his name. They sang it, asterisk,